It's every parent's nightmare.
A beautiful young girl goes on vacation and disappears.
I knew instantly that my daughter was being held against her will.
Another young woman brutally murdered.
Her car was discovered abandoned. Her neck was snapped in half.
One man is last seen with both victims.
Our friends got a weird feeling from him.
He did an amazing job of leaving no tangible evidence behind.
I was told the mob types get the body and the problem has gone away.
When an international manhunt goes cold, he makes a shocking, callous offer.
He claimed that he wanted to sell her remains to me.
This is like a capital S sociopath who's capable of anything.
In-depth, insightful, in a class of its own. It's America's leading journal, Vanity Fair. Brian Burrow tells the disturbing story of Natalee Holloway, lost in paradise.
Flores is the most cosmopolitan area of Lima. It's an upscale area that's certainly much more Europeanized, if you will, than some Peruvian barrio. It's where you would find American tourists.
Miraflores is home to 3 major casinos. On May 30th, 2010, 21-year-old local Stephany Flores hits the Atlantic City Casino, and she's feeling lucky.
Stephany Flores was a beautiful young girl, attractive, attending school. Her father was a well-renowned political candidate. And it was late in the evening, and Stephany had won a substantial amount of money. Clearly, when people win at a casino, word gets around, people know. The next morning, Stephany Flores' family was deeply concerned because she hadn't returned home. It was out of character for her to not notify somebody that she was staying out with a friend. Instantly, there's panic.
Her family calls the police, but they cannot file an official missing persons report for 24 hours.
Quickly, the pieces of the puzzle came together. Her car was discovered abandoned not too far from the casino. Stephany Flores' family were friends with people who owned the casino, and they decided to pull surveillance video and see what we can find. Sure enough, they see Stephany Flores and a young, white, quite large male leaving the casino together.
A casino employee recognizes the man in the video. He won a small jackpot, so they are able to track down his winning ticket. And it has his name. A name no one there recognizes. But in the US, his name is infamous. Vanity Fair special correspondent Brian Burrow spent more than 3 months sorting out fact from rumor about the man in the surveillance footage.
This was a kid who thought he was God's gift to something, probably young women.
Stephany's sister-in-law Googles the name and is horrified. She realizes that he was the man allegedly responsible for the disappearance of another young girl.
"5 years earlier, and 3,000 miles away, in Mountain Brook, Alabama, Beth Holloway receives a disturbing phone call. Her daughter, 18-year-old Natalee Holloway, is missing.
That was the call that changed my life forever. Natalee went to Aruba with her classmates. This was their graduation present. She'd worked hard, and I thought she deserved it.
Beth gets a call, and it's one of the chaperones calling from Aruba, saying that they were supposed to come back today, but Natalee didn't show up.
I knew instantly that my daughter was being held against her will.
Natalee Holloway was your all-American girl. She was beautiful, she was vivacious, she had a fantastic personality. Her parents had separated, and that's not easy for anybody to deal with at a young age. But she fought through it.
Natalee moved to Mountain Brook, Alabama, with her mother and brother in 2000.
Natalee wanted to be a doctor. And I always remember being a little jealous of that because I never really had a clear understanding of what I wanted to do. And she just had the most beautiful smile.
She kind of just jumped right into our friend group, and we all had nicknames. And so Natalee came in and decided that she was Hootie Hoo Holloway.
Who's our special guest today?
It's Hootie.
Hootie Hoo Holloway.
Hi, friend.
What set the Natalee Holloway story apart from any other story was it was really every American parent's worst nightmare. Your daughter's finished high school, she's supposed to be gone for a week to an island that's safe. What could possibly go wrong on an island?
The chaperones and students tried to piece together Natalee's final day in Aruba. They realized she hasn't been seen since the night before.
From multiple reports, Natalee and others drank an awful lot. And the sense you got was not that this was a party girl who was out late every night. This was a straight-A kid who was not used to drinking to excess.
Her classmates remember seeing Natalee leave the bar, Carlos and Charlie's, with a local teenager.
Some of the Mountain Brook students had told us that Natalee was seen being escorted out of the establishment by this guy.
Our friends that remembered him said that he was just around all night at Carlos and Charlie's. They got a weird feeling from him.
Natalee's classmates also remember two other young men with them. All four got into a silver Honda and drove away.
So we had 3 men now that Natalee was last seen alive with, and we had a description of the car that she was last seen being put in.
Beth Holloway and 4 close friends rushed to catch the next flight to Aruba.
Time is of the essence when a person is missing, and I had to get to Aruba to find her. And the one thing I grabbed was her senior portrait to show what she looked like. I don't think anybody talked on that flight. And I think we all knew what was ahead of us.
I just wanted my parents to tell me, it's okay, we're gonna figure this out. That wasn't the message I got.
High school senior Natalee Holloway vanishes while on a trip to Aruba with her classmates. Her mother, Beth Holloway, and Beth's closest friends rushed to the island to find her.
What Beth was going through is, it's every parent's nightmare. I've got 2 kids in college, and every possible thing that could go wrong goes through your head, and you tell yourself as a parent, oh, don't worry about that. That'll never happen to my kid. But you know, bad things happen to good people.
I absolutely didn't feel like Natalee was going to be found unless I was there. And I think that something just took over in me in a survival and instinct mode.
Beth and several of their friends land around 10 o'clock that night, and in no time they're talking to the chaperones, trying to say, okay, what's happening? What are the police doing? Well, the fact is, when a kid goes missing, whether it's in Aruba or Birmingham, the first thing the police think is that they've had her bender and they're slipping it off. The last possibility is a kidnapping or, God forbid, a murder.
In fact, The last time a tourist was killed in Aruba was nearly a decade earlier, when 2 robbers shot and killed an American woman. Missing tourists are not unusual in Aruba. Local police will not even accept a missing persons report for 48 hours. It could be that Natalee is somewhere on the island, simply having a good time.
There was a lackadaisical attitude. Yeah, she's missing. Well, maybe she'll just show up. So that was our turning point to realize we're on our own left to search for Natalee.
The goal was to find Natalee. So we went about it in a very systematic way. We wrote everything down. You know, we just kept in our mind, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen.
But there were these 3 great Aruban air handlers because we flew into a private airport. And they volunteered to help us. We just immediately went with them to the Holiday Inn Hotel.
Once they reached the hotel where the group was staying, Beth and her friends questioned Natalee's classmates about the young man she was last seen with. They remember hearing his name, Yoran.
Some of the Mountain Brook students had told us that Natalee was seen being escorted out of the establishment by this Yoran guy. And we took that and began our journey.
We don't know exactly all their movements that night, but it was pretty clear from multiple reports that Natalee thought he was kind of dreamy.
We went to the registration desk trying to find somebody who could help us with this partial name, and the Holiday Inn night clerk instantly knew who he was. She said, "Oh, the young, good-looking, looks like a Dutch Marine that preys on young women." And I thought, oh, great. This is who my daughter was last seen with?
Just then, the Aruban air handlers arrive with more information.
They're going. We have the car, the Honda that she was last seen getting into, and they came back with a license plate written down and his full name.
That young man is Yoran van der Sloot. Yoran van der Sloot was born in the Netherlands and moved to Aruba. He was the youngest of 3 boys. He was a very good student because his mom was a teacher, so they were a well-known family.
There's so many things you can say about Yoran, but if you meet him, you're struck immediately that he's a handsome young man. Like Natalee, he also seemed to be focused and on the right path in life.
The air handlers tell Beth that the silver Honda Natalee was seen getting into belongs to 21-year-old Deepak Kalpoe. Deepak and his brother, 18-year-old Satish, were with Yoran, who was the youngest at 17, at Carlos and Charlie's the night before. All 3 were seen leaving together with Natalee in the back of their car. That car is parked outside the van der Sloot home.
Deepak and Satish basically functioned as Yoran's wingmen. They kind of followed him around.
Beth and her friends head straight to the van der Sloot home.
They went to the house, yelling for somebody to come out. By and by, a white man in his 50s comes out. This is Paulus van der Sloot, who is Yoran's father, who basically says, I don't know anything. And Yoran says he doesn't know anything at all.
But it begins to turn. He's saying, oh, yeah. Like, oh, yeah, I remember her.
Yoran claims that he and the Kalpoes drove Natalee to a lighthouse on the northwest tip of the island. He says she wanted to see sharks.
He did not paint a great picture of Natalee. He said that she was very, very drunk. He said that she called her mother Hitler and that she wanted to have sex, and that they had engaged in oral sex. But that she was so drunk, they ultimately had to take him back to the hotel.
All these lies about Natalee, about her mother, and they just weren't true. And it just made me angry.
The way that evening actually ended was Euron volunteered to take the group back to the Holiday Inn and point out the security guards who had been the last person in his story to have seen Natalee.
Euron elaborately goes into great detail of how she got out of the car, she fell, stumbled, fell, hit her head, but these two security guards came to her, helped her up, and took her inside the Holiday Inn Hotel.
He walks around the lobby, they try to identify the security guards, and he can't. He says, the guy's not here. So it was a dead end.
That's where he said he left her. So what do we want to do? We want to see the surveillance footage from the hotel.
Hotel employees agree to let Beth and her friends watch the lobby security tapes from the early hours of May 30th.
As the tape started to play and it was nighttime on the screen, we just had every hope that we were going to see her come through that lobby entrance.
My adrenaline was so high, and I felt so passionately that we were going to have an answer by sunrise.
The night Natalee Holloway disappeared, her friends recall she was with a handsome local man named Joran Vandersloot. They were last seen leaving the bar together with Joran's friends, Deepak and Satish Kalpo.
The initial story that we were told was that they had brought her back to the hotel and dropped her off. However, surveillance video from the hotel did not match up with the stories, and that story quickly fell apart.
Night turns to daylight on the screen. We're learning that Iran did not bring her back. So now we're realizing that the last men that she was known to be seen alive with had totally fabricated a story.
Look, a lot of us can understand that the kid might have said, I didn't do anything with her if he didn't know anything about it. But to say he took her back to the hotel, physically took her back, and then that's clearly a lie, that suggests that he knew something nefarious.
And I was just remember just crying and just telling her how hard, that we're trying to find her. And I didn't eat. And I don't know how I was still surviving.
The next morning, Beth goes to see the police and formally report Natalee missing.
When you deliver the 3 suspects whom Natalee was last seen alive with to the police, you feel like they're gonna go arrest them now.
But that's not what happens. Police bring in Joran and the Kalpo brothers for questioning. But the young men continue to maintain that the last time they saw Natalee, she was stumbling into the Holiday Inn. Even though surveillance video does not support their story, there is no proof of foul play. The men are released.
Surely the situation around these 3 persons of interest will be clearer the coming days.
The police assure Beth that they will continue to investigate her daughter's disappearance. She is not convinced.
What you want to do to solve a problem in the U.S., to find a missing person, is to get the press involved. So that's what they did.
I wanted to see if somebody had information about my daughter. Had somebody seen her? Maybe somebody knows the suspects. I wanted one piece of evidence.
And there was an incredible outpouring of support for the family from the Aruban people.
It seemed like a third of the people on that island came out to try to find Natalee. You didn't have to be from Birmingham, Alabama to understand what Beth was going through.
A massive search of the 70 square mile island is underway. Tips begin to pour in.
One of the most promising tips early on comes from Gardner at a large estate. And he told of driving across the island in the middle of the night that Natalee disappeared, and coming across 2 or 3 young men near a pond.
While the local police conduct a full investigation, an American private investigator volunteers to help chase down the new lead.
Private investigators call this witness extremely credible.
This witness destroys the timeline of their alibi. There's no way they could have been home and in bed by 3 a.m. if they were in that field behind the racket club at 2:45.
So this little 5-acre pond becomes the site of international speculation.
I know there were a lot of people that kept the hope up that she was still alive. I always was hopeful that perhaps that was true.
The pond is partially drained, but there is no evidence of Natalee. Police get another promising tip. Someone claims to have seen men burying a blonde-haired woman in a landfill on the afternoon of June 1st, 2 days after Natalee Holloway disappeared.
They knew that this piece of the landfill was active at this time, and they could coincide it with the rumor of the body. So they knew where to search. Horrible job, but they did it. They did it with a lot of police, and they did it with a lot of volunteers.
And it was such a sense of hope that we had, because with every tip or lead that came in, we thought, we're about to grab her right now.
2 days ago, search dogs in that landfill hit on an area that still has searchers very much interested.
Until Natalee's body is found, our case is not closed. Sooner or later, she'll be found. I think she's in the dump.
Of course, they didn't find anything, but again, the Arubans at that time were going to follow those leads, and they were going to pursue it.
Time after time, there was false alarms of evidence that was found in a case when there is absolutely no evidence.
Please keep looking for her, okay? I appreciate it so much.
I think a lot of people in Beth's situation would have been panicking, would have been hysterical perhaps. Beth was laser focused. All she did was work the problem.
A high school senior from Alabama is missing today.
Now police there are treating the case as a criminal investigation.
Looking for Natalee Holloway here in Aruba has become almost a national obsession.
You have to remember that this happened in 2005 in the midst of a huge boomlet of what we called missing white women stories that had really begun in the late 1990s. This type of coverage was a real stalwart of nightly cable television.
I think our goal in the media was ratings. I mean, let's be realistic.
The media coverage helps Beth Holloway attract the support of millions.
We will do whatever it takes. As I've said from the beginning, I'm not leaving Aruba without her.
And the attention puts enormous pressure on Aruban government officials to act.
This is a little country whose business is tourism. And so there's an increasing state of genuine alarm that, geez, this woman is wrecking our business, our livelihood.
My worst nightmare is these individuals will walk and we will still not have any answers.
They're doing what they can to solve this case. That's what we have been assured.
It's going to be up to the government to put enough pressure on these individuals to divulge the information. They know where my daughter is.
Eventually, the pressure forces the Aruban police to act. Just before dawn on June 9th, 10 days after Natalee Holloway disappeared, police finally arrest Joran Vandersloot, along with Deepak and Satish Kalpo.
They were brought in, put in a cell. No charges were immediately filed. And they basically sat in the cell while police attempted to question them.
In a situation like this, what you expect to happen is the camps to divide. The Kalpo brothers on one side and Joran Vandersloot on the other side. In that process, the stories quickly changed.
When law enforcement had to tell me that there was a possibility that Natalee was no longer alive, it was like a bullet in the gut.
Beth Holloway has been desperately searching for her daughter Natalee for 2 weeks. Now, Beth must face a horrifying truth. Police suspect the search for Natalee is no longer a rescue operation, but a recovery.
You can't describe the horrific nature of looking for your daughter in a foreign destination and having to realize that your daughter is no longer alive. It's horrific and it's maddening to have to experience that.
Things really began to take a turn when stories began to circulate that cowposts had turned on Iran.
The story then became that the Cowpo brothers went to the beach with Iran. They went home and left him there with Natalee. He claims he got tired and walked home and left Natalee at the beach by herself.
Changing stories suggest guilt. And I think most of us believe that Iran was responsible for her death. He did an amazing job of leaving no footprints or tangible evidence behind.
Weeks pass as Joran van der Sloot and the Cowpo brothers remain in police custody, but no charges are filed. Frustrated, Beth Holloway reaches out to Harold Kopis, an American private investigator, to help find some answers. Soon after he arrives on the island, Kopis uncovers what he believes is an important lead.
I never understood Paulus van der Sloot's role. I have nothing to show that he was anything other than a concerned father. But I had all sorts of rumors and allegations, including that Paulus van der Sloot was alleged to have mob ties to Chicago.
When Kopis interviews Deepak Kalpoe, he suspects the alleged mob ties played a role in Natalee Holloway's disappearance.
From what I had gathered from Deepak, the body had been left on the beach because she was very sick, had passed out. Van der Sloot gets home. He knows he has an issue. He left her alive, but he suspects she's dead. Tells Daddy. Daddy says, whoa, let's go find out. And that's when I was told the mob types go out, get the body, put it in a fisherman's cage, drop it off the reef, and the problem has gone away.
The main thing I kept thinking is this woman vanished on an island in the middle of the ocean. If she was killed, her body was likely no longer on the island.
The investigators started searching the waters off where the fisherman huts were. And they had a few hits, but nothing that had produced anything.
Investigators look into the allegations. Despite rumors of mafia ties, they are never able to find any concrete evidence linking the mob to Paulus van der Sloot or Natalee's disappearance. Ultimately, Joran's father is cleared of any wrongdoing. Weeks pass. Aruban officials remain tight-lipped about the case. Beth Holloway and her friends are extremely frustrated.
They don't understand that they're dealing with a different system. In Aruba, the police want to take their time and observe suspects in case they may be trying to cover something up. And this is just utterly alien to what Beth and her people want, expect, and demand. They expect that Joran and the Cowpoes will be dealt with summarily, and they're not.
It is now that I ask the world to help me.
The fact that Beth held it together emotionally in the public eye is, to my mind, testament to her character.
On an island where the majority of citizens are Catholic, religious memorials are common. One morning, Beth Holloway is on a local hill adorned with several crosses.
I just fell to my knees at the cross and was praying and just crying and begging for God to give her back. And in that instant, I knew that Natalee was with God. You know, I understood. I understood that, you know, her Heavenly Father, He wrapped His loving arms around her and cared for her through that ordeal. I knew that she was probably no longer alive.
On September 3rd, Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers are released from jail. They are not formally charged with a crime.
Everything was building until that point. And all of a sudden, in an instant, all three were released. And it was just shocking to us.
I was surprised they even stayed in jail that long. They could never take this case to trial. Again, they have no body, there's no evidence. They would never have gotten a guilty verdict in this case.
The next day, Beth Holloway leaves Aruba, more than 3 months after her daughter disappeared. Over the next few years, Joran van der Sloot stays in the public eye. He releases a book called The Case of Natalee Holloway in 2007. In it, he maintains he had nothing to do with her disappearance. And he submits to countless interviews for a fee, providing one lurid tale after another about his night with Natalee Holloway.
Look, among the many things that one suspects strongly about Joran is that he's an extreme narcissist and that he loved the attention at some level, especially once he realized he was at precious little risk as long as he didn't self-incriminate.
Three years after Natalee Holloway vanished, Joran van der Sloot reaches out to Fox News anchor Greta Van Susteren. He offers to tell her the true story of Natalee's death for $25,000. Greta Van Susteren accepts the offer. Her producer is Steph Watts.
What was fascinating to me about him is how much of a nice guy he was. And I had to constantly remind myself that this man has potentially murdered Natalee Holloway, because he was as nice as day.
According to the story he tells Van Susteren, Joran sold Natalee to a man from Venezuela on the night they met.
He says he made arrangements to meet this guy at the beach. And he takes Natalee there and he leaves her with this guy, gets his money, and then that's the last that we've seen. Once he leaves, Greta gets a text. Everything I told you was a lie. I just did it for the money, I'm sorry. And then I instantly thought, you're concerned about lying to us for money, but you're not concerned about what you did to Natalee Holloway? I thought, you son of a bitch. We made the decision to air the interview with the disclosure of what happened at the end, because I think it was important to reveal what a sociopath he was and how darker his world was getting.
Once again, Joran van der Sloot is not charged with a crime.
When Natalee Holloway disappeared, Joran van der Sloot had the luxury of having the complete support of his parents. Even to this day, his mother still doesn't believe that he was involved in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway.
Nearly 5 years after Beth Holloway left Aruba, her lawyer receives a deeply disturbing email.
So after all these years of kind of flirting with the press, it's almost inevitable that Joran comes back to flirt with Beth, which was what he did in 2010. Contact a family lawyer and say, I can give you information on what happened for $250,000.
He claimed that he had Natalee's remains and that he wanted to sell her remains to me.
In the spring of 2010, nearly 5 years after her daughter disappeared without a trace, Beth Holloway's attorney receives an email from the main suspect in her case, Joran van der Sloot. He offers to reveal where he left her daughter's body. But the truth, he says, will cost her $250,000.
Did I think I was actually going to find Natalee's remains? No. Did I ever think I was going to give him $250,000? Hell no, because I knew he was a killer.
If you can get the FBI involved, if you can get a federal indictment, you can go in and try for extradition.
If the FBI can catch Joran van der Sloot in the act of extortion, accepting payment for information, they could have a case that could be tried in an American court. FBI agents coordinate with local officials and record the conversation between Joran van der Sloot and Beth Holloway's attorney, John Kelly.
He tells yet another version of what happened, and again, it's at the beach. He claims that Natalee Holloway didn't want Joran to leave. He claims that they got into a little bit of an altercation and she hit her head and died. He panics and calls his father. His father comes down and helps him with the body.
Joran said that the body had been disposed of at a house under construction. Joran took him to the house, showed him the place where he claimed the body was, and Kelly gave him a portion of the money.
When police follow up on Joran van der Sloot's claims, they discover this confession is just another hoax. The house he said was Natalee Holloway's final resting place was not under construction at the time she disappeared.
This is like a capital S sociopath who's capable of anything. I mean, if you could do what he did to Beth, knowing what she'd been through, he's just a sociopath, maybe a psychopath.
The FBI was on the ground in Aruba, and we felt like we had things in place in order to arrest him once this transaction happened. I don't know why he was not arrested at a certain given moment while this was all happening, but he wasn't.
FBI officials declined to speak about the case because it remains an open investigation. In a statement, they cite the complex nature of international cases as the reason for the delayed arrest.
You know, you can imagine my shock on my end. I'm thinking, this isn't supposed to happen. I mean, we're supposed to have him arrested.
Two months after Joran van der Sloot promised Beth Holloway he would finally tell her where she could find her daughter's remains, he arrives in Lima, Peru, and checks into the Hotel Tac.
On the early hours of June 2nd, hotel employees are making the rounds. What they find is the dead, lifeless body of a young girl. Her neck was snapped in half. She was beaten and covered in blood and left like a pile of garbage. That girl's identified as Stephany Flores. Authorities quickly pull the video from the hotel, and they see Stephany entering the hotel room with a young man. The hotel room is registered to the young man. That young man is Joran van der Sloot.
It just made me sick to think that my daughter's killer had struck again before we could take him off the streets.
Employees search the hotel, but Joran van der Sloot is nowhere to be found.
The Peruvian police immediately put out kind of the Peruvian equivalent of an all-points bulletin for Joran. And as luck would have it, a guard at one of the crossings into Chile saw him in a cab, and they arrested him right there, and he was sent back to Lima.
On June 3rd, Joran van der Sloot is arrested and charged with the murder of Stephany Flores.
One of the reasons Joran went to Peru is Joran was a gambling addict. There was a big tournament in Peru, and unfortunately for Stephany, she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and met the wrong guy.
I think he had the same mode of operation with Stephany as he did with Natalee. He kind of positioned himself with her at the casino, and he just was able to, you know, befriend her. And I think that's how it started.
Premeditation didn't seem to be the motivation in this case. We do know that Stephany willingly went to Joran's room with him that night.
You know, Euron is sometimes a little too clever for his own good. I mean, one of the things that he said about this was that it was actually self-defense because she'd found out who he was and started attacking him, which is ridiculous on its face. It just goes to the desperation of a kid who, having gotten away with it 5 years before and had a degree of cockiness, I think, and overconfidence, that he could do it again.
2 weeks later, Vandersloot recants his confession, claiming it was signed under duress and without an official translator. He remains in prison, awaiting trial.
I went to see him in prison in 2010. It brought me such great joy to walk away from that prison and know he is where he should have been 5 years ago. But I thought, you know what? He's actually in a better place now. The Reuben prison might not have quite been as horrid.
On January 11th, 2012, Joran Vandersloot pleads guilty to murdering Stephany Flores. A Peruvian court sentences him to 28 years in prison.
Will the truth ever come out about what happened to Natalee Holloway? We've heard so many versions of the story that if it did come out, would we believe it?
I think most people believe we'll never know what happened to Natalee. The Flores attack was blunt force trauma. I don't even want to think about what that says about what happened with Natalee.
The details of what happened to Natalee, it doesn't matter to me right now. That doesn't. Really what matters to me is justice being served for Natalee.
I just take comfort knowing that her killer is sitting in prison. That gives me great comfort.